Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. I am your host, the OT Astartes, and welcome back to another edition of Astarties Analysis. And I know it's been a pretty long time since the last one, so basically what's happened is that while I was in production of this video, first time round, basically the bottom flap of my laptop was rather loose. This was an annoyance at first, but then eventually I sent it off to someone who could repair it, and then it's all well and good now. And thus causing problems with this production and the next episode of Hero Factory and Transformers. But nevertheless, here we are with the next episode of Astartes Analysis, looking at Hetty Feather, Series 4, Episode 9, so we're nearly at the final. One episode to go. And then we've got two more series and a few specials, and then we talk about Hero Factory. So, in the last episode, nearly all the staff went to the fun fair. That is, everyone apart from Hetty. That's because at the beginning of the episode they had a draw to see who would go, and then the person whose name got drawn out of the bowl was Hetty. So this was all set up by Brody, meaning that she had to stay in order to train her obedience and her loyalty. So back at the fair, Jack also turned up. He was hiding out. He then spoke to Gideon, asking him to help him write an apology letter, of which the staff who were in attendance and Robert Grenford also had a helping hand. That is until Robert accused Jack of stealing his wallet. Therefore, he called a police officer, and now Jack's behind bars. Meanwhile, Sheila and Agnes were also having a mini feud over Gideon. So, to prove her love for him, Sheila goes off to enter the Festival Queen competition and wins, much to Constance's spoilt disappointment. So, let's get on with Series 4, Episode 9. So, we begin as the March of Satan, as Lady Grenford arrives with a ton of dresses which Emily should try on, which Rosamund claims they have already sorted out. However, Grenford insists that she'd want to look nice for Robert, who won't be returning anytime soon, according to Emily, as Grenford wants her to apologise to him. Because that's how it works in relationships, isn't it? Emily obviously wouldn't agree to this, but before another word is uttered, Grenford goes off to speak to Brody. We then see Jack in his cell as Hetty's opening monologue this week is about expressing her concern as how Jack has been forgotten. Post-cycle sequence, George seems to be out at the office when Grenford has meddled with the menu and encourages Emily to try on some dresses. But her tutoring comes first, so she heads off and is given a letter by Rosamund and is reassured that nobody will ruin her party. Downstairs, Sheila isn't too happy about the menu changes either and hilariously describes this as a fuss over a toffee-nosed girl feeling left out. Now we go to Emily and Edwin, who are waiting for Mr. Buscombe to arrive. So Edwin interrogates his sister about the letter being an apology from Robert. But it turns out that she wrote to Mr. Buscombe's college, which is in Cambridge by the way, since he was spotted out by Constance once already. She has asked for a reference, which we are going to find out about until Fake News Charlie walks into the room casually. And as his back is turned, Emily keeps the letter underneath the table. Hetty is cleaning the empty rooms to give her the opportunity to read the paper, which is looking for writers to tell stories. So that must be The Guardian then. Meanwhile, the tutoring session is silent as Emily takes this chance to open the letter and read it hidden behind the book. Hetty's newspaper reading session is interrupted by Agnes. Hetty describes how much she wants to be a writer, but she's brought back down to reality because she's destined to be a maid. But the reason why Agnes actually came up was because Brody wants to see them in the kitchen. The staff are being briefed as Brody announces that Hetty will be polishing the silver and Agnes will be dusting the glasses. Hetty then speaks out of turn concerning Jack, and that name is ordered never to be mentioned again. So Brody then walks out. Hetty isn't convinced that he who must not be named is the thief, but Sheila thinks that he'll stay in prison, and then returns to her worries about the menu as everyone returns to work. Hetty then seeks help from Gideon, who says that they'll need proof and will be punished if they are caught. So Agnes will be covering for them, as Jack is her friend as well. So detectives Hetty Feather and Gideon Smead are on the case. Back in the tutoring session, Emily reads her letter whilst Fake News Charlie quotes a poem from the Greeks, of which the author is called Homer, not Homer Simpson. Immediately afterwards, he catches Emily secretly reading. So she hands him the letter, and we find out that there wasn't a Samuel, but there was a Charles who had the surname of Buscombe. He claims that he changed this name out of vanity, which convinces Emily that he wasn't lying after all, and goes out to the library, which was the same excuse he used last time, to see Rosamond, who praises his performance and claims to him that she'd be proud of him, even if he was her own son. Grenford then calls her along as they have urgent matters to discuss. Somewhere else in Calendar Hall, a very bored Constance wants Sheila to play with her, but the kitchen maid is rather busy. Afterwards, Sheila uses the term dragon to describe Lady Grenford, so Constance uses this to summon Smaug. See what I did there? But Sheila changes her mind. Speaking of dragons, the Hungarian Horn Tale discusses Emily's opposing opinions of her party. So Rosamond gives her the choice of deal with it or get out. She then comments on Robert and suggests that he looks elsewhere, walking out and dropping the mic. Brody then conveniently arrives, and the dragon is #big mad about the fact that the engagement plans have gone out the window. Brody, meanwhile, hasn't got any information out of Hetty, and her job may be reconsidered if she carries on. So she asks Agnes about Hetty's whereabouts, and it is claimed that she's polished the silver and is gathering the firewood. Wow! 2 fictional dragons have been referenced within 2 scenes. Outside Calendar Hall, Hetty and Gideon somehow find Jack's family home, and they find that this is almost abandoned. They look around for a while when all of a sudden Jack's younger brother surprises them with a vegetable that he describes as a weapon. How do they know where Jack lives? Do they look through his file for some reason? To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised, because she sure as hell did it in Series 1. It would have been nice to actually see that. Back at Calendar Hall, Constance persuades Sheila to try on some dresses which belong to Lady Grenford, so they may be cursed in some way. We then get a shot of Fake News Charlie going into Rosamond's room. Returning to Jack's family home now, and Hetty informs Jack Jr. that his brother is going to be in court later, and they will be helping him. So the real thief, because that's what he is, plays innocent, not thinking that he did much harm, as his older brother was covering for him. So he then lies about his mother not being in when a cough and a faint voice is heard. So Hetty barges him out of the way to see a very sick woman. Returning to Calendar Hall once again, as Sheila plays posh dress up once more, as all that's needed now is a ribbon to complete the dress, which Constance scampers off to get from her stepmother's room, which Fake News Charlie is also in. So we now cut to there as he looks around to eventually find a diary. After he picks it up, the jewellery box next to it is knocked over, and inside of it contains a locket with his name and a lock of his hair. And then out of nowhere, Constance appears like she's the Undertaker and chases him out, which Sheila catches a glimpse of. Now this next scene defines most of what's wrong with modern entertainment in general. So Jack's mother can't afford a doctor, hence the reason why Jack Jr. stole. Hetty says that they could have spoken to George about it, but they wouldn't think he'd want anything to do with them. Gideon then questions their survival if Jack is found guilty, and now the mother is tired, so Hetty and Gideon decide to leave. Afterwards, she comes up with the idea of telling somebody who will believe them. Now, the reason I said this is because all stealing is wrong. Of course I feel sorry for Jack's mother, and there was a similar situation to this in the last season with Sissy. You know, her sister was very ill, her father was nowhere to be seen, and, you know, they at least made an enterprise of which they wanted to save up enough money, which unfortunately never came into fruition. But at least they didn't steal from other people. And hell, seeing as Jack Jr. had a weapon, or his weapon of choice was a vegetable, maybe he could sell them. I don't know. As Jack's a good gardener, maybe he could help with the family enterprise. Just thinking outside the box here, folks. He could try and balance this with his duties over at Calendar Hall, but, you know, it's the modern BBC. Which leads me to the reason why I said this defines a few things that are wrong with modern TV. There aren't any good morals anymore. And if you thought that was the end of this episode's shit shenanigans, well, more to come now, as Constance tries to convince Sheila to accompany her in telling the others about Charles's intrusion, but she apparently has nothing to do with this. But Constance was under her supervision, and therefore it is her responsibility to speak for the child. Briefly now, we cut to Hetty, who is starting to write her sympathy article. So, back to Constance. So she informs her siblings about fake news Charlie going into their stepmother's room, but neither of them believe her. I'd have thought that Emily, of all people, would listen to her, because she was the one who inquired to Corpus Christi College about Charlie's fake name. So, he comes in to explain that he was in the library getting a specific book, which he is holding. Emily wants to call for the nursery maid, but Sheila then walks in, backing up Constance's claim. Charles screws up by using the same excuse that he did last time he was there, so now he's exposed, he starts to pack things up and is sternly advised to explain himself. He lies once again by saying that he works for a rival newspaper as a spy for them, so the Metro. So, Sheila almost goes back to fetch George, but this will be a scandal if this is known to him, so fake news Charlie is told to leave. So, speaking of shitty scandals and bad papers, Hetty has published, and this is what I wrote in my notebook because I was angry at the time, a leftist bullshit delusional two-tier care-loving Guardian article that praises thievery, which Agnes says that George will never read. So Hetty decides to change the names. And the name change that's decided to be used is a gender-swapped version of her name. Right, you ready for this? Henry Footer. Oh yes, because George will definitely fall for that, won't he? Brody is in search of Hetty as she comes across Agnes once again, covering for her friend. But it doesn't work out this time as Brody strides into the study to find Hetty fake dusting. So she slams the door, leaving her to sign the article. So fake news Charlie is about to leave when he pays tribute to Emily's progression throughout the course of her studying, and gives her the advice of not letting her great mind go to waste. George then approaches asking what's going on, so his daughter lies with the excuse that his relative has been taken ill and he will not return. For the love of God, Emily, just say he's been lying. He then has the audience of Rosamond, Hetty and Agnes to see him thanking the calendars and leaving them all behind. Immediately after, Rosamond questions how sudden this is, while George makes good remarks about his papers, which he seems to have left. So Hetty volunteers to pack his bags. A bit later on, Emily and Hetty talk about fake news Charlie as his papers are packed. Emily opens up about him lying, mentioning the name Charles as she leaves, which gives Hetty a deja vu moment. A few things then fall off, including the letter from Matron Bottomley, and after reading it she chases after him as to be stopped by Brodie, who then tells her to await instructions in the kitchen, and after seeing the letter is then called away once more. So Hetty goes into the kitchen to be barred from the pantry by Sheila, who makes fun of her and goes off to help Lizzie. So Hetty takes this chance to hide the letter and rushes off. We then cut to George briefly, who reads a series of letters which appear to unease him. Brodie then goes to the kitchen to see that Hetty hasn't turned up, so she looks in the pantry as referred to by Sheila, almost tearing the place apart to find the letter, and tells everyone to keep this a secret. A little later, somehow Jack returns to plant a kiss on Hetty's cheek to report that his mother is doing much better now, and he has been rehired, so that means they can go on that lovely garden walk. So as he leaves, George informs Hetty that he will be working late and wants to thank a certain Henry Footer for his writing skills, and so all is well as Hetty begins to write. So that was quick then. I take it he somehow rushed to the court, and in the middle of the judge giving the sentence, he probably said, "Judge Rinder, don't! I have a story here that will be totally believable and has nothing to do with me." Alright, you're out. Hey, I bet the judge was Keir Starmer. Our closing monologue is about how one truth has helped Jack out of prison, and another dark one will be dangerous for Rosamond, as she questions whether she should tell her about her illegitimate son. So the closing scene is Brodie giving Lady Grenford the information which will help her conquer Calendar Hall. So I don't know if you could tell or not, but I didn't like this episode. For a variety of reasons. The first one being, it doesn't teach a good moral. From what I can decipher, it's basically saying that steal from your sibling's workplace if you're in a desperate situation. When he or she gets arrested, then just say it wasn't your fault. Just deflect the blame. That is not a good moral to teach children. And we can also partly blame Robert Grenford for getting Jack arrested last episode. But that's not the point. The point is, how this should have been handled is that Jack Jr. and Jack go to George and then tell them about their situation, and he could have helped that way. Not, go to your brother's workplace, then steal everything, and then put the blame on your brother, making him a fugitive, and then arrest him, which was something completely different altogether. And it's not really a good reflection of people in that situation. The other reason would be the fake news Charlie storyline should have ended a lot differently. There and then, he should have confronted Rosamond instead of Emily just lying like he did, And now that just leaves Lady Grenford to tell her the truth, because no one else can. And he used the exact same excuse that he used last episode by going into the library to get something. First time, understandable, but the second time, hold on a minute. Emily and Edwin should have remembered from last time. But I suppose Constance finally contributes to the storyline, but not in the best way possible, because Sheila annoyed me in this episode when she said this has nothing to do with her. This has everything to do with her, because Constance was under her supervision. And why didn't George and Rosamond do background checks on him as well? Shouldn't everyone have to do that? It shouldn't have been up to Emily to ask for a reference. And seeing as Edwin's so suspicious about Robert, why can't he be suspicious about fake news Charlie? And then Hetty shouldn't have really hidden the letter in the pantry. She should have just given it to Sheila, because she might have known that Brodie would have gone searching the pantry, and she did. And then now she's just exposed Rosamond's secret to Lady Grenford. Nobody really seems to have their head screwed on properly this episode. But, you know, let's hand over to Cook Jenkins. Please explain this better than I can. I think I can feel your pain, mate. So how did Jack manage to escape prison that easily and that quickly? I reckon George somehow managed to rush over there and say, "You're right, Judge Rinder, let this young lad out because he used to work for us, and now there's this awesome story in the Guardian newspaper that one of my staff has managed to write, and she's threatening to send it off, I think anyway. So please can I hire him back?" And they were just like, "Yeah? I don't know who were on duty that day. Must have been the Thicky twins. For once I'm in favour of that Lady Grenford woman. Hey, and she even changed the menu and all. You know, if I were in the kitchen that day, it would have been done 10 times quicker. And I know that Sheila's only a Padawan, but surely she should learn to use the Force by now. Well, Mr. Buscombe's finally been exposed. Always knew something were up about him. It was me Jedi senses that detected it. But now he sent his bags packing and leaving. What I don't understand is that why people didn't know he was a fraud to begin with. Honestly, how stupid do the Southerners have to be? If I were there, I'd have caught him out because I'm Northern. And then the so-called moral of this episode is, if someone else does something on your behalf, deflect it to him. Teaching our kids not to take accountability, that's well out of order. Well, we'll just let the civilians deal with it this time. Ta-ra all! And thank you, Cook Jenkins, bringing us to the end of this Astartes analysis. Thank you all very much for watching, and next episode, we're gonna be done with Series 4. Yay! One step closer to Hero Factory. So, thank you all very much for watching this episode, and I will see you all later. Ta-ra!